Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace, and give you peace, and give you peace. The Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you, and be gracious. The Lord be gracious, gracious unto
Hello, my name is Pastor Jay. I've been here at the First Presbyterian Church of Bedford for about 3.5 years now. First of all, we are very sad that we lost Al Walker. And because of the COVID-19 pandemic, and also the rising number of the confirmed cases in Indiana, the family canceled the memorial service. Well, I'm very thankful for the thoughtfulness and considerate decision of the family. But at the same time, all our church members and I are very sad that we cannot say proper goodbye to our wonderful friend and faithful brother in Christ. So we decided to make a video for Al. Some of our members came in person to say farewell, and there are many other members who wanted to but couldn't because they are in quarantine. And if everybody joined the video, I think it could have been like several hours. I think that we have a good enough number of people in this video for the right amount of time. But personally, I don't know Ellen, Donna Ray that well, because when I came here, they were already not in their best health. I just met them several times, like once a month, at the free pancake breakfast at church, where I noticed that both of them were extraordinarily friendly. Then I visited Donna Ray at the hospital because she was sick, and I found that Al was the many times he was singing, and he has a real good singing and speaking voice. And I believe he could have made an awesome pastor with such a voice. And to the grieving family, again, I am very sorry. And our church members also send you the condolences. But we do not lose hope, because we know we will meet again in the future, in heaven, with Jesus Christ our Lord. Thank you.
My name is Bob Lee. I'm a Presbyterian here in Bedford, Indiana, and I'd like to speak on behalf of the church, my family, and the community to a wonderful person I knew, Al Walker. Al was a friend of mine. And when we came to Bedford, Marge and myself, in 1959, we came to the Presbyterian Church, and some of the first people we met were Donna Ray and Al. And Al was the first person, I think, of the church or to anybody in the community to invite us to his home one evening. And so from that point on, I have to say, Al was a friend. Now, I'm not talking about a friend that you see and wave at the grocery store or that you see in church on Sunday morning. I'm talking about a true friend, a person that was there when you needed him, a person that was there when you wanted him, and a person that was there when your family needed help or when we wanted to have fun. He and I boated together, we did everything together, and we enjoyed each other immensely. He was loyal. He was a Democrat, and I was a Republican. But this is a county of Republicans, and Al knew that. He worked hard to get good Democrats to run for office and got a few elected. He was always, always true to you as a friend, regardless of your religion or your political standing. A good story I remember, we stopped going down the Ohio River on a trip one time. We stopped in a little town called Cave and Rock, Illinois, on the boat, and there was a crew of us. We went into Kaler's restaurant to have catfish and eggs for breakfast, and Jim Guthrie was on the crew with us, and he was the county historian for Lawrence County. He was sitting across from Al on the corner, and they were arguing about politics, and Jim picked up his knife and he said, "You're pink, Al, you're pink. You may not be red, but you're pink." And everybody in the restaurant stopped, thinking there was going to be real trouble. 30 minutes later, we're on the boat, and they're sitting beside each other on the bow of my boat, and Jim's saying, "You know, that's where the people came from Fort Vincennes down and came into the river right here during the war." And Jim proceeded to tell him, and Al said, "You know, I didn't know that. I thought they came from Fort Wayne and came in down on the Blue River." And so for the next 2 hours, they discussed the war, the Revolutionary War, they discussed the whole thing, and they were friends, and everybody in the crew looked at each other and thought, well, at least they didn't kill each other. My point being, Al could be on the opposite side of some things and still like you and still be your friend. I always appreciated that. He worked at the radio station. He announced ball games, football, basketball, and was good at it, and was smart. Al was smart in a lot of ways, but he was a very, very good technician as far as football was concerned. We would sit and discuss that and discuss the side, how to play this or how to play that, and what this quarterback did. He was always very, very intelligent about a lot of things going on in this world, and I enjoyed that. I enjoyed him because of that. One of the other stories that I always appreciated, when Al was the Democrat county chairman, he and Donna Ray ran the license branch. And he, because of his position, was able to maybe help some people get jobs. And this gentleman came in one day and said, "Al, I need your help." Al said, "I'll help you if I can." He said, "Well, there's out here on the highway, on the road out here," he said, they're going to be doing some things, and I need a job working out there. When that comes up, Al said, "What kind of a job?" He said, "It's Durbus." And he said, What? He said, it's Durbus. Al said, well, tell you what, you write me a note and I'll put it in a file, and then when that job comes up, I'll recommend you. Al couldn't think what in the world he was talking about, Durbus. He said, is that, to himself, is that somebody's name? What is Durbus? Well, anyway, several months later, the man came back in and it was just Matter and hops. He said, I didn't get the job and they didn't recommend me, and it's all your fault, Al. And Al, he just chewed Al upside one side and down the other and left. And Al called the county highway superintendent and said, what did you do out on the highway out there that this man was in here and wanted the job doing the Durbus? And he said, yeah. He said, we had debris all over and we gave a contract for somebody to move all the debris. Al said, in other words, that's what he's talking about, Durbus. To this day, I don't see a log floating down the river or anything that's piled up someplace without saying Durbus. I cannot say the word debris because from that particular incident. And my point being, Al was there to help everybody, and even if he didn't know what the Durbus stood for. He was good to my family. He was good to my boys especially. Took them under his wing. And one of my boys always asked me, he said, how's he always in such a good humor? Because he always had such a good laugh and could ha, 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 and enjoy things. And I said, he works at it. Well, they appreciated that. And there were several stories of my family and my boys. Al lost a toolbox down in the river one time, and my boys dove and dove and dove until they finally found it and pulled it up. He never forgot that. He always remembered that. My final story I'll tell you, Al had an old VW bus, and it wore out. And he had it parked in his garage. And he had mentioned to me one time, he said, I'm going to sell that thing or get rid of it, have somebody hauled away. So I told another friend about this, and one Saturday morning we went to Al's house, and my friend Bill said, I understand you've got a VW bus. And he said, yes, I do. He said, let's go out the garage and look at it. So they went out there and looked it all over, and Bill said, what do you want for it? He said, I want $250. Al said, that's a good price for it. Then Bill looked it all over, and Al said, now wait a minute. If you take those tires over there in that corner, and that old seat over there in that corner, and get that barrel of tools of parts over here, and get all this, take it all out, I'll sell it to you for $150. About that time, Al's mother-in-law shows up at the door and she says, Al, you've got it all wrong. You've told him $250 for that, but $150 if he took everything. And he said, would you go into the house? Go back in the house, please. Bill said, I'll take it. Let me go get my trailer. Went out and started to go get his trailer, and Al turned to me and he said, I just got my garage cleaned up for $100. Wasn't that a good deal? And I said, it sure was, Al. That's the kind of friend I was with him, and he was with me. I thank the good Lord that he was on this earth for this church, for this community, and for me. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Peggy Julian, and I am a member of the First Presbyterian Church of Bedford. I want to extend my deepest sympathy to the family of Al Walker. I'm sending prayers and hugs your way. I've known Al and Donna Walker through the First Presbyterian Church for over 20 years. And I love to hear Al's stories, and I loved his booming radio voice. That he had such a great voice. Al and Donna and I also connected on our love of history, the Church of Bedford and Bedford's history. And the church just celebrated its 200th anniversary in 2019. And Al and Donna, for the 175th anniversary of the church, compiled a wonderful church history. And this history became invaluable when we celebrated the church's 200th anniversary in 2019. Both Al and Donna were a large presence in the church and in the Bedford community. They were active in both. They leave a large hole in our hearts and in the First Presbyterian Church and in the city of Bedford. Al and Donna will be sorely missed, but I know that they are in good hands and will thrive in heaven. Love to you all.
Hi, my name is Richard Hahn. I've known Al for the 40 years I've lived in Bedford. And with knowing Al, you basically knew a very interesting person, and he was considered a major Presbyterian and knew whatever he was speaking of to be factual. I met him when I joined the choir at the church. At that time, he was a tenor, and I was a tenor. And he had a wonderful voice. He was a blessed person musically. He was raised in a musical family, often talked about how important his mother was in his life. And also singing in the choir at the same time was Al Walker's wife, Donna Ray, and his two daughters, Beth and Gloria. They were quite integral part of the choir. With having a small choir, his family and our family made up a good portion of it. And he had always a lot to say and was very competent and a leader of the community, so that when you knew Al, basically you felt like you knew the town. Our first involvement with the Walkers had to do with the Super Bowl. Al and Donna Ray always had a Super Bowl party in the winter, and we got to know them very well with that activity. When you dealt with Al and Donna Ray, you basically realized that they were partners. They were partners in their business, and partners in the businesses that with the church, and both of them involved in the history of the church as well as the history of Bedford. In fact, I think Al was involved with the sign outside on the church. It designated the history of when the church was founded and when it was located with Palestine. Both Al and Donna Ray were involved with the Bedford Museum. Donna Ray worked long hours collecting historical facts and keeping us all aware of what they were involved with. And as a family moving into town, Ann and I and the two kids, it's always nice when someone takes an interest in you, which we felt that Al and Donna Ray did. And the Presbyterian Church has always been part of Ann's life, my life. And Al and Donna Ray were strong Presbyterians. So we had a lot in common. Al was also a member of the Marine Corps, served on active duty as well as quite a few years in the reserves. And so he, as you know, Marines are very patriotic. And I spent 20 years with the Air Force, so we had in common our activity with the reserves, because I spent 16 years in the reserves And Al spent, as I said, 9 years in the Marine Corps Reserves. Al was a strong Democrat. He was the head of the Democratic Party in Bedford. And his best friend was John Williams, who was a major Republican. So we were, we welcomed the fact that both parties got along so well. And one thing with the country being in the mess it's in, it was nice to have a town where we all got along. And that was due to the fact that Al and John Williams were such good friends. But Al was sort of in town. He had a motorcycle gang I always referred to, and I think that the gang was a good gang, mostly interested in travel. They would get on their motorcycles and head west. And I can only imagine what the gang looked like, because Al was a pretty big guy, and probably on a motorcycle he was even bigger. And most of us have visions in our minds when we see a troop of motorcycles coming down the highway. And I think Al enjoyed that approach to life, where he would be considered king of the pack. And on the back of the motorcycle, I'm sure it was Donna Ray, and together they enjoyed that lifestyle. And Al also was head of the Chamber of Commerce here in town, and at that time they were thinking of building a pyramid. If you can appreciate building a pyramid on the outskirts of Bedford. And I went over there to see the pyramid. Obviously, it never was built. In fact, we got an award in Washington. I forget what the award was called, but it had to do with a project that would probably be associated with ripping off the taxpayers, because the attitude in Washington was that there wasn't really a good idea for building a Bedford pyramid, just because we had a lot of limestone that was available that had been quarried already but had never been used because they were seconds. We had a lot of seconds from the limestone industry that was laying in around the quarries. And if you've ever seen the quarries in Bedford, they make up a major industry. And these stones were weighed over tons. And there probably would have been enough stones to make something big. However, I think that it was a good idea while it lasted, but never did get constructed or even cleared to make the ground available. However, that was one of the more interesting things we got sort of involved with while we lived here in town. And going back to being with Al in the choir, I'm sure Al has sung in choirs throughout his life, at least over 70 years. So when you think about that, 70 years rehearsals, at least 4 hours a week in rehearsal, as well as the Sunday service, and to multiply 70 years by 50 weeks by 50 Sundays, you get a perception of what that involves. And Al also played the saxophone in the chamber symphony, which performed conferences every year in the park, Otis Park. The talent that Al had was so apparent. He had a strong voice, and as he got older, he moved from tenor into bass. So I sat next to him in the choir, like I said, for 40 years, and I could always depend on Al having perfect pitch and being a so acute performer that his musical ability was appreciated in the church. I think that whenever remembering Al, we think of the big voice, the big presence, and the attitude that he had, which is always positive, and he thought the best of this community, and he brought the best to the church. He will be missed, and I wish his family well in the future. Thanks for this opportunity.
My name is Ed Voris. I first met Al. He hadn't been in Bedford that long, but I was just out of the Army, and he was working for the Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company. I remember him most as a Renaissance man, a man of many gifts and talents. After his salesman career, he did radio announcements and was a announcer for the WBIW radio station, a radio personality. Then I remember him as a business owner and entrepreneur, and also as the chairman of the Democrat Party of Lawrence County, and finally as the director of the Bedford Chamber of Commerce. Always active, always giving of himself and participating. Have many fond memories of Al in the church. I'll never forget his deep, booming voice in the choir. I also remember him as a church historian at the 175th anniversary. A bunch of us were herded into a van, and Al took us on a tour of Palestine. And he had found an old abandoned Presbyterian cemetery that no one knew about in the extreme southeastern part of Lawrence County. I remember him as a member of a Sunday school class where he always had lots of ideas and comments. And Al was a deep thinker. I finally will always remember when he stopped singing in the choir and sat out with the rest of us. He still enjoyed a fine performance. And when somebody, or if the choir would do an especially good performance, Al would always, at the end, boom out, and the people said, "Amen."
Hi, Gloria and Beth. This is Ann Armstrong. I did not prepare a speech because I wouldn't follow the speech anyway, but I'm really glad we have a chance to talk to you about your mom and dad. Can't talk about your dad without talking about your mom too. Don't have a lot of stories, but my favorite story is I knew Al long before I really met him and knew he was a knew about his politics. And when we were introduced, I said it was so nice to know one of the two Democrats living in Lawrence County. And I still count him. Now we have no one. I guess we'll have to dig a few up. The other is just your dad's spirit here in the church. Being in choir with him, you never knew what was going to happen. You know that already. And I loved whenever he appreciated music, which was a lot, and the people said amen, and that's my favorite memory of Al. I think about you guys a lot and look forward to seeing you. Beth, tell your family hello and sympathies to them. That's it.
Hello, I'm James Lee Hutchinson, longtime member of the Presbyterian Church. And I wanted to say a few words about my memories of Al and Donna Ray, because they have been here, like myself, they have been here for so long that so many people that they worked with and knew have passed. So I wanted to get in on this and just talk about Al and his services to the community as well as to the church, because he was a very valuable member, and he did so many other things in the community that reflected on his membership here. And I just think that those two people did a great deal to keep this church alive and to keep the community aware of all the things and services that we could provide or would provide. And Al's service in the choir and Donna Ray's in the choir, both in the choir for years. And they were added much to services. And Al, of course, was at Northwood Institute as a teacher. He was Democratic County Chairman for a while. He was always interested in church history. For years, he was an announcer at the WBIW Bedford High School, Bedford Lawrence basketball games, and he was very good at it. And I just wanted to say that he is remembered. I remember when your family came to Bedford. So that's how far back we go. And just appreciate his service, his life, and Donna Ray's life in the choir and in the community. Thank you. One of his greatest services was serving to improve roads in southern Indiana. And he worked with the state and the local committees to get new highways and improved highways and take out a curve here and there and straighten out a road or add a lane for the Amish. And he did improve that one road all the way from Highway 64 up to English. And so he spent much time doing that and working with the state people. And once again, we do appreciate his service. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mike Alexander. I am organist emeritus at the First Presbyterian Church. I played the organ here for 37 years before retiring about 12 years ago. I first knew Al actually back in the early 60s when I was in high school, at Bedford High School. And I was in the band, played for basketball games, and Al Walker and John Williams gave the play-by-play at about all of the Lawrence County basketball games. We had like 8 high schools in the county then. So that was where I first heard Al on the radio. I thought it was an interesting connection because Al was, as you other people have probably already said, was chairman of the Democratic Party in Lawrence County, and John Williams was chair of the Republican Party in Lawrence County. So I imagine they had some interesting conversations between calling the games. My first personal association with Al was when I first started dating Sherry, my current wife, and started coming here to the Presbyterian Church. And it didn't really take too long before I was recruited to sing in the choir. Sherry was singing in the choir, and of course Al sang in the choir. He was He sang in the tenor section. Actually, a lot of Sundays Al was the tenor section, and had a strong, good, powerful singing voice. It wasn't too long after that, the current organist that was here graduated from IU and moved on, and I started playing the organ here, first of all as a substitute, and I had probably played here maybe almost a year. It'd been a while. And then one Sunday, Al asked me, said, "Hey Mike," said, "can you stop by my house right after worship?" And I said, "Sure." And so I stopped by the house up there on 5th Street next to the fire station. Well, what Al wanted to do was interview me for the organist position. Al was on the personnel committee, and I guess the session finally decided that I'd played here long enough they'd make it official. So Al actually interviewed me for the organist position here, a position which I held for 37 years. And of course, I had a lot of association with Al playing the organ, with him singing in the choir. Lots of good stories. Al was always had some sort of a tale to tell. My other association with Al was with the band program. First of all, when my kids started high school out at B&L, they were in the band, and Paul Hinman became the new band director, and the band started to grow and started to prosper, started to get better, and they had more equipment that they had to move. They even bought a semi-trailer at that time, so they'd have enough room to haul all the props and the uniforms and the instruments and all that. And the percussion instruments that were on the sidelines grew and grew and grew to the point that it was just too much for a few people to carry out. So we decided we needed a four-wheeler to be able to pull all the percussion equipment onto the sidelines. Well, the semi-trailer was getting so full we didn't have room for the four-wheeler on the semi-trailer. So Al Walker graciously loaned the school his motorcycle trailer. And we would load that four-wheeler onto that motorcycle trailer. We'd hitch it on behind my little S10 pickup, and I pulled that trailer all over southern Indiana to all sorts of band competitions and everything. Then when we would get to the competition, we would take the four-wheeler off, hook the trailer up to the four-wheeler, load it up with percussion equipment, and we would use that to pull percussion equipment on and off the field. And it was interesting. That trailer basically started living out at B&L. And if Al needed it, he would call us and say, "Can I have permission to borrow my trailer?" And and to my knowledge, that trailer is still sitting out there. I know after our kids graduated, it continued to be used and set out there, and I think it was even painted red, white, and blue and all that. So Al was a staunch supporter of the band program at B&L. Another thing that he was very instrumental in was the Bedford Community Band, and you can see I'm wearing my community band shirt. Back about 78, we had not had a community band for a long time. There was one, as I recall, back in the 60s, but Paul Hinman and Al got together and talked about starting a community band with adult musicians from the community. And of course, Al thought that was a great idea, so we formed the community band. And I call Al my saxophone buddy. I play the alto sax, and Al played alto and tenor sax, and we would either sit next to each other or real close to each other during hours of band rehearsals and concerts and you name it. And so we could say that Al, along with me, I think Mary Hardesty, at that time, Wayne Anderson, we were kind of the charter members of that community band, and some of us still play. So that band has been in existence now for well over 30 years, 32 years, I guess, and this, unfortunately, is the first year that we have not performed because of the COVID-19. So, you know, Al was such a big community band member. He also was instrumental, again, a little pun there, in forming the Nostalgia Band and played saxophone in that. I remember one instance where I didn't play in the Nostalgia Band, I played in it one time. And that was when they were celebrating Al and Donna's 50th wedding anniversary. And Al decided to have a big party at the American Legion, I believe. And he wanted the Nostalgia Band to play. Well, of course, if it was his anniversary, he couldn't very well play his saxophone along with the Nostalgia Band, so he recruited me to play his tenor saxophone, and so I enjoyed doing that. Al also announced the music at the community band concerts, so he was just such a big supporter of that. Seemed like there was something else I'm going to say, but I can't think of it now. I just want to say that Al will certainly be missed. I know I always enjoyed associating with him. He always greeted you like his best friend. And I know that now Al is up there in heaven, in that community band in heaven, playing that tenor saxophone as loud as it will go. Thank you.
Lord.